Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Supply Chain Talk. Today we have an amazing topic, improving supply chain risk management with better visibility. I'm Ana Maria Velica, founder at Green Apples Career, and I'm your host today. Before I invite my experts and guests to the virtual stage, I would like to thank you all to our audience that registered on the Business Reporter website, as well as to the audience from LinkedIn. We are broadcasting on LinkedIn, so welcome. Fasten your seat belts and please engage with us. If you connect with us via Business Reporter, make sure that you open the chat box to address your questions, your compliments, why not? Because the best comment and question will be rewarded with a Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered by my colleagues from Business Reporter. So, my first panelist is Pavan Prasad. Can you please unmute yourself? Hello, welcome to the Supply Chain Talk.
Hi, Anna. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Pavan. Pavan is a senior director consulting supply chain, pharma, and life sciences at Genpact. Pavan is a supply chain advisor specialized in transformation projects. Pavan experience spans across industries, practitioner roles, and has worked with leading consulting firms. Pavan brings expertise primarily focused on pharma and the life science industry. And outside of work, Pavan enjoys hiking and going on nature trails with his family. This is really nice. My second panelist is Thomas Panzer, all the way from Germany. If you can please unmute yourself and switch on your camera. Hello, Thomas.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thomas is a retired SVP, Supply Chain Management in pharmaceuticals. Thomas is a mechanical engineer by profession and worked for 8 years in this line of business before he moved into a large pharma company. Thomas worked in supply chain, in controlling, accounting, and project management in 3 locations in Europe and US. As a fun fact, Thomas is a motorcycle enthusiast since he was 14. Bet you can master this skill, Thomas.
Thank you.
My third panelist is Katerina Peta. Katerina, welcome to our Supply Chain Talk.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Good to have you. Katerina is Senior Manager, Strategy and Operations Consulting at PwC Belgium. Katerina plays a significant role in PwC Global Logistics Center of Excellence. She provides insights and guidance to the PwC network worldwide, focusing on supply chain strategy. Katerina's career has taken her to no less than 5 European countries, more than me. And she's now settled in Belgium, where she's embracing the culture and the chocolate. This is amazing. I can envy you for the chocolate a bit. Because
specifically the chocolate, primarily the chocolate.
Yes. So welcome to our Supply Chain Talk. We have a beautiful and very generous topic today, very actual. But before we go into the main 3 topics, I would like to invite you to comment about our news item. And we chose managing the modern supply chain because it refers to many challenges, to many complexities that come with supply chain risk management. The growing complexity of global trade that makes managing supply chain risks more critical than ever. It talks about risk managers having to re-evaluate continuously the supply chain strategies, talks about geopolitical climate concerns, visibility being a key factor, especially when we talk about tier one suppliers, and how important is to rely on automation. Although many companies still struggle and they shift from manual data to machine learnings and AI. So I would like to invite you very briefly to comment and express your thoughts. Pavan, what do you think about the news item?
I think it's very interesting and is very much relevant to today, right? I think the two items that caught my eye, one is where they talk about the Oliver Wyman study. And obviously you would expect there's an uplift in revenue if you prioritize risk, which they say has 8%. But the key one there is also uplift in profit, which is 19%, right? Typically, you'd look at this resilience activity as something that drains your cost, and obviously it's good for the revenue. But people forget that it's going to help you avoid the demurrages and all the penalty costs, right? And definitely also helps with your bottom line. So that's a key one that caught my eye from the article. And the other one is also in terms of the relevance. It spoke of all the risk factors that we talk of, but the tariff, which is given in the last few weeks, is really, really important. It's certainly on top of the agenda. I mean, I remember 5-6 years back, you would have this value chain transformation as one of the last line items, and you would look at the supplier risk and so other geopolitical, definitely. But the tariff one has just jumped top of the agenda, and that's really relevant. So those are two things that I noted on the article, very contemporary.
Super, thank you, Pavan. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
I can copy what Pavan said. Actually, maybe some additional thoughts, because working for over 26 years in the pharmaceutical industry, you can imagine that we have a long experience, because risk management is one of the major tasks of a supply chain management position in this with growing responsibility. And certainly the entire world got more complex, and for us it was since years an absolute necessity, not to maybe to compensate for lost revenues or profits or turnover, but just to ensure that especially our patients who take life-saving drugs have ensured supply the entire time. It was not easy, especially in times of COVID and or Ukraine war and so on. I think the entire system was definitely put under stress, and so we have a quite sophisticated approach, which was first in the first years certainly manual, then it went into Excel, and then it went into more or less automated and sophisticated systems, and we can talk about this in a minute.
Thank you. And I think the angle of the type of the industry, pharma industry, is all about critical product. You cannot go out of stock because it's about saving lives. Katerina, what are your thoughts about the news item? What do you think?
I think it would be remiss if we didn't recouple the risks and the types of risks that are mentioned in the article. And there is a reason why I would like to do that. So the first type of risk is a concentration or single point of failure risk. So they don't put all your eggs in one basket risk, let's just say. Then we talked about disruption risks related to geopolitical events, related to climate crisis, and so on and so forth. There is a wider risk with respect to sustainability. There's a wider risk with respect to climate change, and of course, the recent global trade risks. Why I'm mentioning and recapping all of them, and I would like to give an example, is also the trade-off that modern supply chain managers need to continuously reevaluate with respect to those risks. So, client of mine in industrial product, let's say wider construction applications, they were very, very pleased to have identified one supplier that provided an innovative and more sustainable material with respect to a certain application, with respect to a certain frame that they built, and his reaction, his heartfelt response with respect to that is, okay, we identified this supplier. It's not so widespread to have innovation. It's not so widespread to have materials that do respond to our sustainability targets in this industry. But it's one supplier. We cannot find a substitute. We cannot find, a second one. For sure, we have to have a sole sourcing strategy. So I know that I am exposed there to a different type of risk. What do I do? What would you do in my shoes? And I think that as advisors, we need to also be mindful and support this kind of decision tree, continuous decision tree that is there with respect to the risks that need to be managed.
Thank you, Katerina. I like your example, especially that comes from my days in procurement, talking about single sourcing, talking about bottleneck sourcing. Yes, it's quite something when you find one sustainable suppliers within a bottleneck category. Let's delve into the main topic, which is improving supply chain risk management with visibility. And given the current black swan type of reality we are living in, we as supply chain leaders, we really need to get creative at identifying the risk with better visibility. And I would like us to, as a round table, to comment about trends and priorities in supply chain risk management. Pavan, in Genpact or throughout your career, how do you advise your clients in terms of trends and priorities in supply chain risk management?
So first of all, there's a big trend of looking at supply chain risk as a different lens now. And again, there are multiple events that has pushed this top of the agenda, right? And I remember around like 2019, this is a mid-tier pharmaco, Japan headquartered pharmaco, and we are looking at supply chain risk management profile. And if you remember, you would have this supply chain risk profile created. There was a spreadsheet tool, right? The frequency was on paper quarterly, and the whole idea was that every quarter we'll go through all the supply chain execs and update the risk profile as something has changed on the product, on the market, and so on. But in practice, they're doing this once a year. And I remember saying, like, doesn't that keep you blind to something coming up? And they said, yeah, it does, but then it's really busy. There's a spreadsheet tool. People don't have availability. And now if I look at that example, and today, it's completely different. Supply chain risk is top of the agenda. That's a key trend I see. Many factors contributing, start from Brexit to the pandemic to Ever Given and all of those that we already know, right? To current one. So that's a big trend. And in terms of going to the market, until just a few years back, you would have SNOP or the IBP as the key offering that you want to take to market. You want to tell to your clients, like, listen, if you want to make the biggest impact, this is where you need to look to. Yeah. Today that's changing, because many of, at least the big pharmacos or the bigger organizations, they are stabilizing their IBP processes. The key one is, how do you actually take that visibility beyond the walls of the organization and then look at the network wider, right? So that's the second trend in terms of how we are approaching what I see in the market vis-a-vis supply chain visibility. But those are the two key ones. Getting bumped up the agenda, and the second, the focus shifting from inside the organization to outside to the network.
This is really interesting, because many organizations, some of them I worked for, they are really focused on IBP, and they believe this is how you unlock the power of an end-to-end supply chain visibility. What are your thoughts in terms of trends, priorities? Thomas?
So question goes to me. Okay. I try to reflect what Pavan said, and certainly I can also copy and mention maybe some things which happened starting with the trend around the second decade of this century. So 2014, 2015, we decided to move away from the, I would say, very distributed risk management activities and went to an end-to-end. And what does it mean end-to-end? Because this is very often in discussion. And this started not only to identify certainly to tier 1 suppliers, but went into tier 2, tier 3. We try to understand the entire network behind, because sometimes it was the case that tier 2 suppliers had the same tier 3 supplier. So means the picture you got when you went to tier 1, tier 2 was still mirrored. And then the second part, it went down the supply chain, so downstream towards distributors, towards wholesalers. So this trend, I think, is still ongoing and unbroken, to extend these kind of risk management to entire supply chain from end to end. And you know that we hear this since years in a lot of discussions, webinars, and certainly also conferences. But if you really look into what means end to end very often in the evaluation, then it's still limited in some areas. So I mean down to the patient level, down to the pharmacy level, down to the hospital level. Then we have a complete supply chain. And this was our ambition. And we started this, like I said, around 10 years ago. And certainly you cannot manage these kind of complex networks manually anymore. So you need to define at a certain point, because we do a long-term planning over 15 years in supply chain. So we decided then really to combine this with our long-term planning activity. And you can imagine, if you then try to plan for 15 years for 280, 300 brands in a network of over 80 CMOs, 30 sites, and so on globally, 140 markets or even more, then you can imagine this is nothing what you can do without the power of very state-of-the-art tools. And we went even overboard because, or not overboard, we went the next step actually, because more and more, it's not only a question to recognize in an annual process, we did it annually, and to identify the risk, and then to decide if you want to cover them or if you want to accept them. This was a very big discussion always, and what to cover and what to accept, but how to mitigate then at the end, and to which cost. And the cost aspect got more and more important. And I think this is something which I will comment also later on.
Thank you, because you're providing this risk management methodology by the book. So this is really important. Katerina, from your experience, knowledge, expertise, how do you, what are your thoughts around trends and priorities in supply chain risk management?
Absolutely. First of all, I think that we need to reflect when what we mean when we talk about supply chain. So the paradigm was linear. Okay, inputs, suppliers, transformation process, outputs, customers, and so on and so forth. It's no longer like that. It's a circle. So to echo Pavan, he mentioned top of the agenda and bespoke processes. The processes that we knew are not enough. We need more. We need something new. I will also echo what Thomas said about multi-tier, end-to-end, holistic context. So it is an ecosystem. It is a multi-tier, connected, self-driving, maybe in a future ecosystem. And there a couple of requirements are present. There is a requirement for near real-time actionable insights. There is a requirement for partner coordination, and there is a requirement of proactive incident resolution. So if you take all of these, you cannot expect not to have a technologically enabled solution. Let's call it control tower, for lack of a better word. And this is an offering that we'll see more and more coming into play with respect to managing visibility. But next to that, I would like to also emphasize that you need empowered people, and you really need to build the combined priority and understanding with respect to what makes the full ecosystem tick. So this is in a nutshell my overview.
I love the ecosystem, and I love the leadership and the empowerment piece, because there is no supply chain risk management risk mitigation, better visibility without an amazing, inclusive, empowered supply chain leadership and team. So this is music to my ear because I'm very passionate about this. And in my career, I think what I'm seeing now when I mentor organization, I'm seeing ethical sourcing, because when we look even in the medical, in any industry, people are looking at, even when you press Uber, you have a choice to use green Uber. So, and this is my favorite, for example. So I think ethical brands, ethical sourcing is becoming a trend, an important one, and companies are really now implementing end-to-end visibility, traceability, ethical sourcing standards, also because there are so many regulations coming up. So the second topic, and I encourage our audience to comment, address questions. We have experts at the table from PwC, from Genpact, people with decades of experience. So guys, don't miss this opportunity. So I think we have for your in-photo panel, I've just muted. Sorry. This was for us. It was the internal kitchen. Shouldn't.
Yeah. I see the question there, and Thomas, I see your comment as well. So do you want to take that one around who owns the end-to-end process?
Yes, who, according to you, owns the process end-to-end panel? Yes, who would like to take it? Pavan, would you like to comment on this one, please?
I can pick it up. Thomas, I saw your message. You're on mute. Maybe let me start.
Yes, yeah. Somebody muted me. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
So yeah, it was clearly defined. I, as a supply chain head or former supply chain head, owned the entire process. So I also needed to report it to the board or board members on an annual basis. But we distributed it certainly in our organization. We established brand teams, and as we talked about the rollout of a real, true end-to-end process, we said these are the only ones who really understand their network best, so their brand or their brand family. So we split the entire supply chain horizontally from end to end. And so in our shop, 7 teams were responsible for their products to do this assessment and to aggregate this on a global level.
Awesome. Can I just quickly add to that? So if you, and Alexander, thanks for that question, right? There are 2 ways to slice this. One, in the network, who owns that end-to-end supply chain, right? Like there are multiple parties. You've got the manufacturing organizations, people who are distributing, then there are the suppliers or end-tier suppliers. The key point there is who owns the brand, right? So if it was a pharmaceutical company, you would be talking about the MH. So the MA holder is responsible for end-to-end supply chain, because that's how everybody looks at it. If it is a CPG, the brand owner is responsible for that. And now within organization, as Thomas, you put, who owns this? CSCO, right? Like head of supply chain would own it, but then you can't really get this because you have your distributed team, and you need to then make several ownership, and people know, like, for example, supplier side of visibility or risk is with the supply team, right? Like similarly, their market, and it again comes to fruition in something like a M&A kind of activity. Is very important that you start taking the strings and you really figure out how complex it is, like who's our owner. So that question comes up there as well.
Exactly. And if you still debate who is the owner, maybe it's the time to take ownership. We have some views here. Alexander Way saying, why not purchasing leaders? They have the highest impact at suppliers level. Yes.
That's true.
But purchasing and procurement teams, they don't have access to demand planning, or depending on the organizations, especially in to the commercial end-to-end is also about the downstream supply chain, and procurement, this is outside of procurement area. Razvan Gabriel Tyra, a comment, the ethical piece is very much connected with the ESG vision set by the company. I believe modern customers demand such transparency, and it acts as a trigger for both companies and governments to act on it. Yes, Katerina, any thoughts around what Razvan says?
Absolutely. So yeah, it does act as a trigger. Again, depends on the industry. For example, in food, it acts as a trigger to trace all the way back to the origin. And the more complex the agri-food chain will be, the more this need manifests, not as, track and trace visibility, but really going back to the soil, the farm that started the whole process. That is one example. Another example with respect to regulation that may come, that we are not even aware that that is coming, is counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is a huge problem for which visibility is a very, very important piece in the solution. And what I'm talking about counterfeiting, I'm not talking only about apparel or luxury goods or, the irritation of discovering your bag. I'm talking about counterfeiting of very serious products, pharmaceuticals, for example. They are absolutely subject to counterfeiting, especially in those contexts where there is not, the welfare system we enjoy, for example, in Europe. People are subject to very serious risks with respect to their health. So there is a lot of ethical aspects beyond sustainability, but referring to overall welfare, overall health, that do trigger responses on end-to-end visibility.
Thank you.
Correct. Correct. If I just quickly add there, it's interesting to see the questions because on ESG is one of the driver, right? We're looking at the drivers. What's driving this visibility? ESG is one, right? We spoke of tariffs and external activities, and those are one. ESG is a regulatory one. And the previous question from Alexandra is, again, that's more a framework. How do you look at your visibility? Internal, external, demand side, supply side, and then, yeah, definitely purchasing is supply side, right? It's quite interesting.
Thank you. Let's go into the second topic because yes, I see the warm-up has been made and now everyone is very chatty and I'm delighted. How better visibility can improve risk management across different risk categories? Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah, I said already, I'm a big believer that nobody can manage actually this complexity, and we had a strong discussion also just recently if it makes sense to combine risk management and the entire multi-echelon analysis, optimization, and so on you need with your planning, with your real planning systems, which is a problem if you do it long term. Then you have to do all the master data into the system. Actually, nobody is doing this because the entire portfolio changes too often. So nobody can bear this work. So you need some kind of some systems which are outside of the planning world, derives the actual master data out of the planning system, and then you simulate. So, and this simulation, as I said before, then goes as far as you need also to simulate certainly not only the consequences if you decide to mitigate a risk, for example, to put a second supplier in place or to put a second backup plant in place, which is chiming in a disaster case, but also if you decide to manage this via inventories, for example, to then evaluate what kind of costs are coming with it and is it worth actually to cover then these turnover or the benefit. And it is impossible, to be honest, with all the risks, and I think Katarina did it very nicely or put it very nicely, all the areas, if you just check all the risk areas, you come up with 20, 25, and it's getting more and more. COVID was a big litmus test for that. Then you see you cannot cover all the risks. So you need to make a decision, and certainly if you go to a board or to a CFO, he wants to know the cost and he wants to know the consequences, and you need to come up with scenarios. You need to say, do I go left or right? Do I get cash optimized or profit optimized and so on, or EBIT optimized? Do I safeguard revenue? And to do this, you need to provide these options and make active decisions. How do you want to develop your network? So that's why it's impossible to do this without any kind of state-of-the-art systems.
Being a supply chain leader is also a mission impossible. Katerina, yes, Thomas, and you talk about cost, you talk about the likelihood and the impact when you look at all these risks. Katerina, in your view, how better visibility can improve risk management across different risk categories?
Okay, so I want to make a distinction. I want to make a distinction between what Thomas just mentioned, which is decision support technology, to, I like the word what ifing. I know it's not a real word, but it renders the idea. So simulate scenario making, presenting options for the whole network. Okay, so network design tools that are becoming more and more potent with artificial intelligence and so can cover this need to what if. And then there is an aspect of interconnectedness and near real time. And there we see other aspects of technology that have to do with sensing, that have to do with track and trace, that have to do with telemetry, that have to do with remote detection and resolution, that have to do with data collaboration. So Thomas mentioned master data. It's not just the data that belongs in the organization. It's data that is relevant, is shared by the full ecosystem. And we need platforms for that. They cannot be collected manually. And indeed, we are talking about the predictive and prescriptive capabilities of technology into then converting this data to insights of what you need to do, not next, 2 steps ahead. So playing, this chess of being a little bit further, not looking in the rear view mirror, which was something that was mentioned in the article, but looking at the windscreen and driving ahead.
Exactly. And I love the annual volume forecasting as a demand planner when back in my time using mathematical models, so using predictive analytics, using different scenario simulations, not only relying on the past, but also modeling the data you have. But you need digital twin, you need huge investment on that one. Pavan, anything to add in terms of?
I think I'll echo what Katerina as Thomas have said, right? It's exactly that. And in terms of the framework on risk management, you look at foresight. So can you really sense the risk coming before it hits you, right? Oversight, the fact about end-to-end that we spoke, and also the insight, and Katerina referred to that as decisions, right? So how do I do that? And for all of that, you need this digital twin technologies, and that's very much important, right? Initially, I gave you that example of doing this once a year, but you need to do this more often, and you can't do that without technology. As Thomas said, multiple 25, 30 lines, and that lines keep increasing, right?
Exactly, yes. And Thomas, now if we go into the key market and the regulatory drivers for improving supply chain visibility, and if we take, for example, ethical sourcing is just one, real-time delivery is another one, predictive analytics, another one, having a competitive advantage. What other key markets, regulatory drivers have you come across in your career?
It is actually changing and a moving target. Okay, we had a global setup, and our key markets have been in the Americas or Asia Pacific and in Europe in the same way. And you can imagine that we everything what for example Katarina mentioned, requirements for counterfeiting, fully traceability alone if you have recall processes in the pharma world. These are regulatory requirements which were active starting years ago. So we had the ability certainly to establish this. This realization came, I think, for Europe in 2019. So I think also 6 years already. Other countries follow. Then you have local requirements, which is for your risk management a kind of challenge, because it gives you a regulatory hit to an optimized design of your supply chain network, and tells you, no, it does not accept that you have maybe two or three sources. We want to have a source in country XYZ, and there are around 20 countries, 15 to 20 countries around in the world who have these kind of local content requirements. then it goes certainly forward with iron stock requirements. So especially Europe now is, I would say, a little bit on the forefront to require for some medical drugs or for some medical need drugs 90 days of iron stock. So you cannot even keep them as a kind of breathing stock to manage other uncertainties. You have to ensure it is there. You have then, if you're not meeting this requirement, you have penalties to pay, which are, which hurt, and so on. And these are the requirements we are currently facing. It is another, I would say, challenge which you need to include in your network design and network optimization and in your risk management.
Thank you, Thomas. Katerina, what do you think in terms of, give us some examples for small organizations, because we have comments that we refer to big organizations that have the power to invest in digital twins. So it's underway. For your comment, Katerina, so what do you think about regulatory drivers for small organization, for SMEs?
Yeah, let me put a thought forth. I don't think that anybody is too small for ESG. I don't think that anybody is too small for digital twinning. I do not think that anybody is too small to think of a control tower or indeed a simulation tool. I think that what we have experienced, like a regulation, applies to everybody. What technology enables is that solutions can also have applicability to smaller realities and smaller organizations. It's so I wouldn't make a distinction necessarily between risks that touch big organizations and risks that touch small organizations, or regulation that exempts certain realities. What I would give an example of is that there is a regulation also with respect to aspects that we tended to forget, and they're always there and applicable to everyone. Again, it's not a line, it's an ecosystem. Things also go back. So there we have the constant regulatory pressure of managing returns, of managing waste, of reducing impact, and so on and so forth, that may clash with the increasing need to invest in the physical stream in order to have, near real-time visibility. And I think that this is something that could apply to everybody in terms of contrasting regulatory pressure and regulatory pressure that has been there all along. That would be my my thought, my 2 cents on that piece.
Katerina, to be very honest, I agree and disagree with your point of view, because yes, no small company is small enough to comply with all this AI and keep up, but I am a small company. I can't implement a digital twin to make my supply chain very, smooth. So, but what I can do, and what small organizations, and this is what I mentor, organizations, transform your procurement, transform your supply chain from where it is today to become less reactive, less firefighting, to be a bit more proactive. If you have enough investment, working capital to invest in all this data management and analytics, yes. If not, just make a plan and a roadmap to get there. So I would say transform, continuous improvement mindset, I would say. Pavan, anything to add to these key market regulatory drivers?
Exactly. So the market driver is very much competitive, and then businesses, or where if you see the competition is high, that's going to force you, because visibility is no more just an option. You must have that, right? And in terms of regulatory, we spoke of ESG, and Thomas mentioned the pharma regulatory ones as well. I mean, in Europe, obviously it's ahead of the pack. So you have this ESMP, where you can actually put the shortages, right? So you have visibility of shortages, and what that needs is the organization needs to report, right? I'll quickly touch upon that question as well. So if you're a small organization, as you rightly mentioned, Anna, digitalization is an aspect of it, but you definitely can start by transforming your processes, right? So obviously create the prioritization around which are your key products, which that can threaten your market viability, right? Which are the key supplies or suppliers, right, that you need to have visibility into, and then create that framework of insight and foresight, right, and oversight, where we go to your key suppliers and have your connects, which is checking, hey, this is our key supply product, raw material. Do we have visibility of it? Do you have stock of it, right? Is there a production schedule at risk? So you can definitely transform your process, and that's always the precursor to bringing digitalization.
Perfect. And putting in place strategic partnerships. I have a comment question from Kendra, and I will address it to you, Thomas. In the current economic climate, where cost reduction, navigating potential tariffs are often prioritized, do you find that supply chain sustainability initiatives are being overshadowed? How do you communicate the return of investment of ESG risk to leadership, especially when these risks may not be immediately apparent when the current position on evolving compliance regulations is wait and see? Really.
Yeah, I really thank for the question, Kendra, because some of my comments went already into the direction that risk management and risk mitigation costs money. So nobody should believe that doing the entire show with 3 or 4 suppliers instead of 1, or 3 or 4 production sites to cover risks and to have a warm backup is for free. So all these costs have, or everything what you do has certainly a price tag on it, and it is certainly an extreme tough job to balance this. And you have on the one hand your commitments of a company, and okay, I'm coming from a large company where we had very strong and clear messages from also our board. So it was more or less up to me to give different options to achieve the targets. So it was definitely very high on the agenda, but it was definitely also said, we cannot implement everything just without looking into the options and price. And that's why I think what my job was over the past years really to prepare always different scenarios. What is the volume or capacity scenario? What is the cash scenario? So minimize inventories. What is the EBIT scenario? So minimize costs, actually drive EBIT up, and to play with it around and say, what is the best option for the entire company? And maybe going back a little bit to the question which came from Alex before, we can always say, yes, we have big companies, we have also big teams on this, but also we were not able to mirror the entire network. So also for a small company, there is also an 80-20 rule. So you have maybe 80% of the revenue, which is driven by 20% of your products. And you have to start with that. And we started also 2015 with the end-to-end network optimization with only 6 large medical needed and potential brands which drive the revenue. So you have to start with that and leave the huge complexity to the biggest extent out.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. I would like to award the Supply Chain Talk mug to Kendra for making this comment, which is quite disruptive. And actually, it's quite a reality in many organizations. So thank you, Kendra. Supply Chain Talk mug will be couriered to you. So stay tuned and connected with my colleagues at Business Reporter. Now, because when we have fun, time flies quickly. So I would like as a round table, but please be brief, otherwise I will cut you off. So please briefly and disciplined as we are in supply chain, a round table, concise, closing thought and an action item for the audience in terms of improving supply chain risk management with better visibility. Pavan, your closing thought and action.
If you don't have your risk profile already created for the supply chain, map it. That's the #1 agenda. If you already have it, look how can you digitalize it? What's out there in the market that suits your scale, and you could do that.
Amazing. Katerina, your
I will echo your mantra, Anna. Transform, transform, transform. And I would like to build some common ground. I still don't think it's as expensive as you might think. Yes, there is investment, but there are solutions out there, and I'm happy to delve more into details with whoever is interested.
amazing, amazing. Thomas, your closing thought and action item.
When you build or design your supply chains, try to avoid risks. If you cannot avoid, then minimize and reduce the risks. And after you have done everything, then the reality kicks in, like COVID, like other disasters. And then you need to manage the risk. And here, the workforce, a skilled workforce of high capable people are, for me, one of the biggest point of the entire supply chain. They rescued us over the past years.
Thank you, Thomas. From my side, I would encourage with the risk management, with transformation, with digitization, with everything that has been provided by my guests and experts, without learning from the past mistakes. No continuous improvement can be made. So I think progress is only happens when we keep the lessons learned. So keep a log, make it part of your team's meeting, lessons learned alongside the supply chain risk management. I would like now to invite the audience. Thank you so much for being, it's an outpouring, messages and comments. Thank you so much. I would like to invite you to our next talk show. I have the privilege to host a beautiful episode about building stronger supply chain through due diligence and resilience. So becoming stronger. And I would like to have you again on my show. Thank you, Pavan. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Katerina. Hope to see you soon on my show.
Thank you all.
Have a
Thank you
lovely
very much.
of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.